from an ACT Party point of view. Starting with some of the comments by Simeon Brown, I was surprised to hear that from Simeon. We've worked together well as health ministers to bring more medicines to New Zealanders. I think people want to see more of the kind of cooperation that Simeon Brown and I have done to get more medical availability in pharmacies and the like than bickering amongst politicians. Nonetheless, I'm sure people will draw their own conclusions on that. The Green Party, in my view, have shown a real evil in their message that New Zealand's problems are that other people have succeeded, and if you vote for them, they will take people's money and give it to you. They are seeking to take the dark underbelly of New Zealand's otherwise happy culture, being tall poppy syndrome, and make it the official government policy. The Beatles were joking, I think, when they said that if you die, you should declare the pennies on your eyes. But the Green Party are not joking when they say they're going to tax you even after death with an inheritance tax. And that flies in the face of what most New Zealanders work for through their lives, is to leave something for their children to have a better life than they had had. Now even that is not sacred and has become taxable. That is in line with additional taxes on income at 45%, taxes on your house, and really a culture that opposes success. It says that if people have done well, then they're fair game. We actually need more success, more billion-dollar companies, more high-paying jobs, more exports, and more people prepared to take a risk. Nobody forces any family to invest in their small business using the equity on their home that their children sleep on. However, many families do take those kinds of risks to build a family business, and if they succeed, they shouldn't be punished. They should be able to keep the benefits of their success, not become public enemy number one, as we've seen with this so-called greed crisis. The real greed is wanting to go to the ballot box and vote to be given other people's money at their expense. We've also had comments from the National Party at their conference today, and I have to say the idea of making it easier to save while having children is a very positive one. Savings-based retirement schemes disadvantage women, and while we'd have to see all the numbers and the details, it's the kind of thing ACT would like to support, because we believe that no matter whether you're man or woman, mother or father, you should have the ability to have a career, start a family and retire comfortably. On the other hand, the idea of 12% compulsory KiwiSaver savings, I'm sure will be popular the first time people hear it, until people ask, where does the money come from? That's 12% of your income that you can't use to pay down your mortgage, you can't use to invest in your small business, but you may find you are borrowing from the banks. And the problem with compulsory super, anybody can already contribute 12%. People don't, because they want to pay off other debt and invest and save in other ways, such as paying down their mortgage and investing in their small business. If you start forcing people to save and they have to borrow against that saving elsewhere for their home or their business, really it's an enormous gift to the financial sector. They get fees for holding your KiwiSaver, and they get more interest if you pay down your debts and your mortgage slower. I think it's a policy that needs a lot more scrutiny than it has had so far, because ultimately forcing people to use 12% of their income with no exceptions for building a business, no exception for paying down your mortgage, and no relief on the other taxes you face, I think will be disruptive for New Zealanders. And anyone who thinks that the money comes from the employer, I'm sorry, it comes from your remuneration package. It's 12% off your income forcibly, when many people who currently have that choice don't actually make it. Those are some of the things that have been released today. The ACT Party, meanwhile, will be campaigning to lock Labour out and unlock New Zealand's potential. There is no reason why we shouldn't be the wealthiest, happiest, healthiest country in the world, except for the policies of red tape, bloated government and excessive tax that we put on ourselves. We're really looking forward to this campaign. We think we've got a huge amount of positivity to offer to this country, and we're going to be launching it on Sunday, 1 week to come, on the 28th of June. Happy to take any questions you may have or have sent through.
On those compulsory employment contributions with the increasing rate, do you think, would you have designed this policy differently, in the sense that, if you're a lower income, that amount, increase can actually be a significant amount out of your paycheck if you're spending all your money, right?
Well, 12% of your income, it's almost an extra GST, except it's not just on things you buy, it's on all of your income. So it's probably more than GST in addition to the tax you're already paying. So for us to support it, you'd have to see, are we going to give people dispensation to pay off their mortgage? Because that's the best thing most people can do for their long-term future. Is there going to be dispensation like they have in Australia to invest in a small business? Because that's the real engine room of the New Zealand economy. And will it come with tax relief so you don't have to pay, maybe 30, 33, 39% tax, and then another 12% on top of that?
So by dispensation, you mean that you wouldn't have to make the contributions if you were instead using that money to pay?
Well, imagine, for example, if you could say you have to do 12% in your KiwiSaver, but if you pay off your mortgage, you can actually reduce what you put into your KiwiSaver and effectively put it into your mortgage. Because for a lot of people, that is a form of saving. It's the most important saving people have. Similarly, in Australia, there's an exemption if you need to put money into your small business and build your wealth that way. You're not forced to save. Even their so-called compulsory scheme is not as compulsory as some people say.
Do you think it should be income stratified in the sense that if you're at a lower income level, you shouldn't have to make the higher contribution?
Well, just remember, everybody needs the income when they retire, and it's a percentage. So I'm not in favour of more progressive taxation, but we have to be honest about where the money comes from. This 12% is not free money. That's why most people don't do it now. That's why they're making or proposing to make compulsory what actually is currently not a choice most people make.
Can we afford it?
Well, you can afford anything, but is it the best use of your money? People have to pay off their mortgage. If you pay your mortgage slower, you pay more interest to the bank, and you pay fees to the bank to manage your KiwiSaver. This is a great policy for banks. I'm not sure that ordinary people will be any better off, maybe slightly worse off.
It's not exactly clear how much it's going to cost businesses. Do you have any idea how much it's going to cost businesses?
Well, the 12% comes out of your remuneration package. When a business employs someone, they've got a certain budget to employ that person. Doesn't matter if it's KiwiSaver, if it's tax, if it's salary, that's how much money they've put aside for that employee. So the idea that somehow the business pays, no, sorry, this is coming out of your wages.
Overall, David, what have you made of the National Party AGM this year?
Well, I want them to do well. I want all of the coalition parties to do well. We need to keep Labor out. That is the ACT Party's #1 priority. Lock Labor out, and I hope that they put forward good policies and have a good campaign. I don't think there's any room for the parties bickering. Most people want to lock Labor out and unlock New Zealand's potential.
While we're on the parties bickering, Seymour Brown described you and Winston as squabbling kids. One wants the heater on, the other throws the window open. Which one are you?
I was surprised by that from Simeon because we've worked well together to make more medicines available. I think people want more of us working together the way we have and less of that kind of bickering.
Just on the wealth tax idea, I mean, do you accept there is this kind of almost global sort of frustration, especially in younger generations, around not feeling they have a fair deal? And I mean, do you accept that as a legitimate concern for people to have, and what would be your sort of response to that?
Yeah, people are frustrated because income growth has been very weak and asset appreciation has been strong because there's been too much inflation in the world. My suggestion is we need to get inflation under control. That's largely done. Then we need to remove the red tape and unlock our potential to grow wages. If your solution is just to chip away at those who may have made some money in the past, there's no long-term future in that. That is just squeezing the pips until they're dry, and then none of us have anything. If we choose to be a country that scares away people who try, then we'll just all be poorer. There's no long-term future in trying to divide the pie a different way to get a few votes and stay in power for another 3 years.
Are we overtaxing income in relation to capital?
No, because capital produces a stream of income, so you can't actually tax income without taxing capital. Some people think you should tax the stock of capital and the flow of income it produces. I say that's double taxation.
I mean, do you think that wealth inequality is a problem, like in the sense that that is going to lead to greater societal stability, or do you disagree with that idea.
Wealth inequality is not a problem so long as all people have the opportunity to do better. And that's why education matters, that's why infrastructure matters, that's why the housing market has to be functional and affordable. But the fact that one person has made $1 billion, that doesn't actually take away from anyone else. If you think about the people who have become very wealthy in New Zealand, they've all started from nothing. You know, Graham Hart was a tow truck driver. The Mowbrays grew up relatively poor in rural Waikato and built $1 billion company. You know, Rod Drury was not a wealthy guy, but he has created $1 billion company that succeeds all over the world. We should want more of that success. People succeeding is not a problem for New Zealand. In fact, it's a solution, because every time somebody builds $1 billion company, they create higher paying, more interesting jobs in our country, and they inspire other Kiwis that maybe they could do the same through blood, sweat, tears and imagination. Maybe more of us can have that success, and it doesn't matter if you're building a small electrical services company like some people I met door knocking yesterday, or if you're building a multi-billion-dollar giant killer that takes on the best in the world. What matters is that we have a culture that celebrates success, a nation of winners, not a nation that drags people down for their success, which is what the Greens really are producing. Their idea is that your problems are caused by someone else's success, but if you vote for them, they'll drag them down.
Do there need to be more tax revenue sources though? I mean, even Singapore is having trouble keeping its government spending below 20% of GDP.
Well, New Zealand has 32.9% of the economy taken in tax. That is right in the middle of the OECD, the developed nations, and it's one of the highest taxes on the Pacific Rim, which is probably more relevant. So you look at Singapore at 20%, we're at about 33%, Australia's a bit lower than us, Japan and Canada are a bit higher. We're actually in the middle, towards the top of the Pacific Rim nations as taxers. We don't have a shortage of tax. We do have real problems with the efficiency of government, and that's why the Ag Party is going to be campaigning on a smaller, more efficient government.
Super costs though, I mean, they are going to make that 20% of GDP target, or even our current percentage of GDP target, impossible to meet, right? Effectively.
Well, it's crystal clear that when wealthier countries all around us are raising their age of entitlement because people live longer and have fewer children, we can only delay the change. We cannot put it off forever. I would rather we made the change in a planned and sensible way than have it foisted on us by some financial crisis 10 years down the track. The people who say that we're going to keep our heads in the sand about the reality that all our peer nations are raising their age of superannuation, all I'd say is you keep your head in the sand, you'll get your butt kicked.
Will wealthy people leave this country if they're made to pay more tax?
Some will, some won't. Some people will choose to invest elsewhere when they would have invested here. But we know, for example, that if you put a tax on alcohol, then people will buy less alcohol. If you put a tax on working, people will work less. If you put a tax on investing, people will invest less. It would be strange if taking more of people's money didn't make them change their behaviour.
Are you in favour of this? I mean, I guess if we talk about KiwiSaver and you know, overseas countries like Singapore, you have accounts for a lot of different things, right? And that's been an idea that's been proposed that we shouldn't just be having savings for retirement accounts, we should be having other forms of savings. Are you in favour of that, or do you know?
Look, the Ag Party's promoted student education accounts in the past, that you should have an account for your education funding. I don't think it's a bad idea to have medical savings and education savings accounts, but you've got to be careful that you make the transition properly and you don't end up with a partially compulsory savings scheme and a partially tax scheme, because at the moment what National have proposed is you pay all the same taxes and you do the 12% extra. There's got to be a deal where if you take more responsibility you pay less tax.
Does savings then need to be, I mean, there's also taxation on these contributions, right? So does that, I mean, if you're going to be increasing the contributions or you're going to be adding different savings accounts, do you need to address the tax?
Well, all around the world people have the argument, should you get taxed when you put your money into your savings scheme or get taxed when you take it out? I'll leave that to the tax experts. What I'm saying is that overall the amount of tax that you pay needs to come down if you're being asked to take more responsibility with compulsory savings.
Winston has been heard saying that the National Party is in trouble. Is he right?
Well, clearly their polling is soft, and perhaps that explains some of their response lately. But I would just say the coalition at its best works together to solve problems for Kiwis. The ACT Party has so many examples, from medicines to reforming the Holidays Act to cutting red tape, where we've worked with our partners to get a better outcome for Kiwis. My advice to everyone in our coalition is point to the things we've done to make New Zealand better. Don't point your finger at each other. All right. Thank you very much, team. Appreciate it. Cheers.